Hey guys, this is Mitch with FinePoint CGI, and today we're going to talk about how to do a settings menu inside of Godot. So we're going to go through the process of creating our settings menu, and then we're going to go ahead and create each individual drop-down box, have it so that it sets all the selected and does all the things that we're looking for. And then we're going to set it up so that we can save and load our settings on startup, so that way the user doesn't have to re-input their settings every single time. And last but not least, we're going to talk about project settings and what those are and how to set them and the advantages and disadvantages over top of doing the method that I'm doing. So that's what I have in store for you guys today. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to build our scene, because if we're going to be doing a settings menu, we can't just have nothing in our scene for us to see like some changes. So what we're going to do is first we're going to go ahead and make a 3D scene. We're going to right click, add in a child node, and let's go ahead and add in 2 mesh instances. So we'll add in our first mesh instance, and we will go ahead and make that a quad mesh, and we're going to go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees here. We're going to scale this up so it just has a nice good scale to us. And then we're going to go ahead and control duplicate that and change it to a cube mesh. And I'm going to go ahead and scale this down a tiny bit, so that way it just kind of fits with just having a small cube in our scene. So we'll put it like that, give or take. And that should do it for us. So from here, let's go ahead and design our interface for our settings menu. Now, the interface I'm going to design is pretty simple because I don't really need anything special for the settings menu. So, you guys can style it and make it look pretty if you'd like, but a pretty simple settings menu. So we're going to go ahead and right click on our spatial node. We're going to add in a child node. We'll add in a control node. And we'll go ahead and call this our settings menu controller, and then we will go ahead and make this full screen. So we'll make it full rect. Then we're going to right click, add in another child node, add in another control node, and we will snap it to the right wide. So we'll go ahead and click on that, and we'll pull this over some, and let's make it a little smaller. So we'll go with something about, about yay big, give or take. And then inside of our control node, let's go ahead and add a VBox controller. And what a VBox controller is going to do is allow us to have perfect rows for our content. So our content will stack on top of each other. I'm sorry, VBox container. And let's go ahead and make that full rect, so it kind of covers the entire screen here. So now what we can do is we can go ahead and right click, add in a child node, and add in an HBox container here, and we will right click that and add in 2 things. We're going to go ahead and add in a rich text label, and we will go ahead and add in a drop down. And in Godot, we don't really have an actual drop down, but we do have what's called an options button, which is basically a drop down. So now that we're here, we can go ahead and set up our menu here. So if I go ahead and start typing resolution, you'll see that nothing has changed. And the reason why is because we need to come down to our rect and change our minimum size up to have it so our resolution word can actually show up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my minimum size to 120. And I'm going to do the same thing for my options menu as well. I'm going to make that 120 as well. Now, I know I'm kind of running through this. I figured it would be better for me to run through it than just kind of sit there and babble on about stuff. So next, we need to actually name our button here. So we'll go ahead and change this to resolution dropdown. And what we're going to do is we're going to control D our HBox container. You can see that it made a duplicate, and that allows us to quickly fill out this options menu. Now, The options that I'm going to go over is resolution. We're going to do anti-aliasing, SSAO quality, bloom quality, SS reflections, and full screen. Okay. So what we are going to do is we're going to duplicate, like I said, this, and then we will make this our anti-aliasing. And we will change this to anti-aliasing. And then we're going to duplicate this a few more times. I think I said, what? Did I say 5? I know there's probably 4. Nope. Now there's 5 of you saying there's 6. So we'll go ahead and duplicate it 2 more times. And what we'll do is we will go ahead and click on our anti-aliasing. We're going to go ahead and say SSAO quality. And I'm going to copy that real quick and paste it here, and then go ahead and say bloom quality. And then we'll come down here and we'll go ahead and paste this and change it to SS reflection quality, which actually I'll just go ahead and get rid of that. So that way I don't have to make my screen any bigger. And it looks like I was correct. Full screen. Looks like we got all of them. Nice. All right. So we're going to have to come in here and set up all of our drop downs. So anti-aliasing, SSAO quality drop down. And then we'll come here and we will grab our bloom quality drop down. SS reflection drop down. And finally, our last one is full screen drop down. Okay, so now that we have that, we need to go ahead and set up the rest of our scene. So for us to be able to set these settings, we need to have an environment because SSAO, bloom, and SS reflections are all specific to our environment, and resolution, anti-aliasing, and full screen is more towards our actual editor environment. And with this, I'll be going through kind of how to do some more fancier stuff, and that way it can kind of give you guys the tools to expand upon your settings menu. Now, what we'll do is we'll right-click on our spatial node. We'll go ahead and add an environment. And we will go ahead and add an environment. And let's go ahead and make our background sky. Let's make a new procedural sky. So that way we have this nice sky. And then we will go ahead and add in subsurface reflections. And we'll go ahead and add in SSAO. We will go ahead and add in some glow. And that should work. So we can kind of drum up our intensity a little bit on our SSAO. Just so that we can actually see the changes in our SSAO, because I'd like to actually show you guys, you know, how it changes and how it looks. So we'll just do that, kind of tighten this up a little bit. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and add in an object here. So let's actually grab our mesh instance here. We'll go ahead and control duplicate that, bring that over, and go ahead and take the material, give it a new spatial material. And let's make it emit light. So that way it should glow. There we go. So now we can look at our glow quality right here. So we'll just kind of up our emission amount. So we have some glow here. And then we'll also click on our plane here. And let's go ahead and make that have a material, new spatial material. Let's make that have a high reflection and metallic value. So we'll kind of pull that up and make it so it's reflective. And we might actually need to add in a reflection probe here, so that way it can actually reflect our scene. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's lift it up a little bit and make it so it has reflection. Simple enough. Awesome, awesome. So now that we have our little menu here and we have our node here. We need a camera, so let's go ahead and add that. And let's make it so that it can look at our scene here. So we'll rotate this by about 45 degrees, and we'll pull this up and rotate it once more. There we are. And we'll go ahead and rotate this down so that it can see our scene. And that'll about work. I am getting some darkness here. Well, we'll go ahead and get rid of our reflection probe, and that seems to clear it up. So it's something to do with reflection probe. I'm assuming the ambient color is causing some problems. For some reason, it's not registering the sky. So I'll just leave that for now. We don't need it for the tutorial, so it's perfectly fine. So what we can do now is we can come into our settings main menu controller. Let's right click and attach a script and go ahead and create that. Now comes the very fun part where we run through and add all of our drop downs here. So let's go ahead and go to our node and say item selected, and let's go ahead and drop it into that menu. Do the same thing with this one. Item selected. Next one, item selected. Next one, item selected. Next one, item selected. And item selected. All right. So each one of our drop downs needs to have a signal attached here, else we won't know what gets selected by our users, right? So we won't know, oh, they wanted, full screen or not. We could run through a loop and check, but I generally find it easier just to do it off a signal. If you guys want to do it off of a generalized check, basically what you would do is you would fetch through all of these, determine their index, and then from there you can determine your quality settings. Now in my case, I'm going to go ahead and just do it this way. But now we need to go through the process of setting up all of our little menu buttons here. So if we go up to the top, we can go ahead and click on our resolution. We can click on our items, and we have to actually add in items to our list. So what we can do is we can click add and add as many resolutions as we want. In my case, I'm only going to add 3 of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go 3840x 2160. I'm going to go with 2560x 1440. And these numbers don't matter. None of this matters, but I'm using them as a way to tell the user what resolution they're going to be at. The code itself is going to determine what resolution they're going to be at. So these are just syntax sugar for the user to see. Then we're going to do 1920x 1080. And then finally, we're going to do 1280x 720. All right. Now we're going to go to the anti-aliasing, and we're going to do 5 options, and we'll say FXAA, MSAA2X, MSAA4X, MSAA8X, and then finally disabled, because we want to give them the option to be able to disable AA. AA can be the deciding factor between having good FPS and bad FPS. So go ahead and click OK. And then we'll move down to SSAO quality. So we'll click on items, add. We'll do 3 of them. We'll say off, SSAO low, SSAO high. We'll click OK. And then we'll move down to our bloom quality. And what we'll do is we'll click on here, add, and we will say high, low, and then off. All right. Now we're going to do our SS reflections. And I know this is kind of boring, but it needs to be done. So we'll click on this, and we'll do, 4 of them, let's say. We'll start off with high, medium, low, and off. All right. Last one, full screen. We'll add 2. We'll say off and on. All right. So now that we've got all of that set, now we can finally get into coding, which is the best part. So let's go into our script here. All right. So now that we have our interface set up and all of our signals connected, what we can do is we can go ahead and start hooking all of this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here, I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to go ahead and say var window underscore size is equal to os dot window size. And what that's going to do is that's going to give me the current resolution of my desktop. And then I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, if index is equal to 0, then we need to go ahead and set up our window size, right? Now, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to set up a variable here called var min size, and I'm going to go ahead and make that equal to a vector 2, and we'll just say 0, 0. And then in here, we're going to say min size is equal to a vector 2 that we could just say, 2160 by 5, I think it's 510 or something like that. But what we can do instead is we can say window underscore size multiplied by 2160 divided by window size dot y. And what that's going to do is that's going to give us a perfect representation of our screen. Because if I have like a 2K monitor that's ultra wide, that is going to handle this completely differently. And it's going to look completely stretched if I don't properly adjust my Y or my X value based off of my screen width. Because if they're in a 4:3 monitor or a 16:9 or a weird resolution, it's going to really mess with our screen resolution. So we need to make sure that we keep it, uniform with math. And then for our Y value, we're going to go ahead and say 2160.0. All right. And then we'll have else if index is equal to 1. Then we're going to do the same exact thing. So you're pretty much going to see me copy and paste this a few times here. And we'll say 1440 and then 1440 right here. And then you're going to see me copy this, and let's go ahead and paste this a few times. That way we can get some, quick code down. So we'll say 2, we'll say 3, and that should be about it. And we will say for this one, we will say 1080 for 1080p. And then we need 720 for our 720p resolution as well. Now, after we have this, what we need to do is we need to go ahead and get our tree. So we'll say get tree. And what your tree is it's basically the root of your game. So it's literally the game engine's root. So the nice thing about your tree is it has basically all of your game options. So then we'll say dot set screen stretch, and we need to choose a stretch method. Now this is up to you, completely up to you guys on what your stretch method is. In my case, I'm going to do viewport, but you guys can do anything, whichever one works for you. So please feel free to experiment and see which one works best for you. In my case, I'm going to go viewport, comma. Now from here, we need to choose the aspect that we're going to be doing. So scene tree dot, they have a bunch of different aspects. So you see like keep all, keep height, keep width, ignore, and expand. And in my case, I'm going to do with keep width, it looks like, because I couldn't tell which one I was doing. In my case, I want to do keep height, comma, and then we'll go ahead and set it as our min size. Now, what did we do here? Well, what we did was we got our window size, we went ahead and got our minimum size, and then we went and set our minimum size, and then we went ahead, got our tree, set our screen stretch to our viewport style, and keep aspect ratio, and then we set it to the resolution that we wanted it to be. Now, one of the things that you have to understand about Godot is Godot handles resolution differently. It's not the display resolution, it's the render resolution. So you could render it at 1080p and stretch it up to, 4K. Your screen would look very fuzzy, but it's a more efficient way to handle this than changing the display resolution, because then the user doesn't need to worry about changing their display resolution and messing with, drivers and crap like that. Instead, it just handles the internal workings of Godot. All right, now let's go down and you'll see that we have anti-aliasing drop down. Now this one is interesting because your anti-aliasing settings is in your project settings, and you have to come down to rendering here. And you have to find it in here, right, to change it. So if you come in here and you go into, I believe it's under quality, and then right here you can set your MSAA right here, and you could do FXAA as well. So, it's really cool that it's here, but it's really hard to get to because there's no node that you can just go ahead and fetch, right? You just, change it in here, right? Well, what you can do is you can actually fetch it through your viewport. So what you can do is if you come in here and you say, hey, if index is equal to 0, then what we're going to do is we're going to get our viewport dot, and you'll see that there's a bunch of options here. Now remember, these are all options that you can make for your option menu. So if you wanted to have like the different MSAAs, right? Or if you wanted to have some options for render info, or if you wanted to have some options for perhaps, how you handle FXAA, or really there's a bunch of options here. So, you can mess with like HDR settings and things like that. So, like I said, I'm scrolling through these, but it really allows you to change a lot of options. So be sure to check on it because there's a lot of cool stuff like render distance and things like that you can set here. Okay. So just to let you guys know, this is an awesome place for a lot of different options. But in my case, I'm just going to change our MSAA equal to, and from here we can set our MSAA. Now, if you guys remember correctly, index 0 is FXAA. So we'll go ahead and set MSAA to disabled, and we will get our viewport dot FXAA, and we'll make that equal to true. And what that's going to do is that's going to disable MSAA and turn on FXAA. And then we're going to want to go ahead and copy this, hit enter, paste it, and then do elif, and we will go ahead and do index of 1. And if I remember correctly, that's MSAA to X, and we'll want to disable FXAA. So we'll go ahead and copy that, hit enter, paste it, and we will say 2, and I believe 3, and then I think we need one more, so let's go ahead and paste that and say 4. And then we'll change this to MSAA 4, MSAA 8, and MSAA disabled. If I remember correctly, is what we had. So we'll go ahead and keep that. Now, if we wanted to add 16, we actually could, but 16 is an extreme performance drag, so I generally don't have it in any of my games. But you can have it in there if you'd like. Just go ahead and duplicate it and add it. Now, the next one, you saw how we pulled information from our viewport, right? So those are some of the options that we can pull. The next one is based off of our world environment, right? So we can go ahead and just say, hey, if index is equal to 0, then we can say $, and you'll see that we actually don't have the world environment under here, right? So how can we go ahead and fetch that data, right? Because we don't have it here, so we can't just do $, right? What we can do is we can go into our world environment and we can go to groups. We can go ahead and add a group called world node. We'll go ahead and add that. And then what we can do is we can go up to the top of our script here and we can say, hey, on ready, let's go ahead and create a variable, world environment. And we're going to make that equal to get_tree dot get nodes in group quote world node. And we're going to go ahead and fetch back the first one we see. The reason why we don't want to do all of them is because if we have multiple world environments and there's a problem that we need to fix. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to set a script on my world environment that says, hey, is there any other world environments in my scene? If so, then I'm going to kill, I'm going to queue free and remove myself from the tree. That way I don't have multiple world nodes, because you shouldn't have multiple world nodes in your scene. So now if you scroll down here and you say, hey, world environment dot environment dot SSAO underscore enabled is equal to false. And what that's going to do, and honestly, we might want to set this to as a world environment. And that will force us this to be a world environment, and that should help us out because that's casting it as a world environment. So this is guaranteed to be a world environment. And what we can do now is we can say, hey, else if index is equal to 1, then we're going to say world environment dot, and you can see now we have auto completion here, so we can actually, work with what we got. So environment dot SSAO, and you can see here's a bunch of different options here. And that's the cool thing about this is we can actually come in and really mess with this and really make it look good and work good or work well. So we can say SSAO enabled is equal to true because we need to set it to exist. And then we could say world environment dot SSAO quality is equal to environment dot, I believe our next one is low. And we could actually do a medium if we really wanted to, but I don't think we want to. And we can come in here, paste it, index of 2, SSAO quality high, like that. And there we go. So that's another way of handling our quality settings, is we can actually grab our world environment and change it from there. So I'm going to go through a few more of those in our world environment so that way I can kind of hammer home how useful this is. So if I come in here and I say, hey, if index is equal 0, then let's go ahead and say world environment dot SS. Oh, I don't know if it's going to pick up SS reflections. SS underscore reflections. Or does it under environment? Let me see. env dot SS reflections. Okay. SS reflections enabled is equal to true. I believe it's the first one is true. So we'll say true. And then world environment dot SS reflection max step is equal to, and we'll say 64. That's a pretty high resolution there. And then we'll go ahead and say, all right, else if index is 1, then our reflections is true, and we're going to say 32. Else if our index is 2, we're going to set it to something like 8. And then finally, we're going to disable it, right? So we'll go ahead and do that. And we will completely disable it. We'll just say false. And that's just going to go ahead and set all of our bloom quality, right? Now, if we come down to our SS reflections, which I believe is our last one of our world environments, if index is equal to 0, then we're going to say world environment, much like we did earlier, environment dot SS reflections enabled is equal to true. Oh, whoops, I did this on the wrong one. Oh my goodness. Let me go ahead and grab all of these, copy this, paste it down here, because this should be down here. And then let me go up to my bloom quality. Oh my goodness. So we'll say index of 0 for bloom quality is world environment dot glow enabled is equal to true. And then we need to go ahead and say dot glow bicubic upscale is equal to true. And then we can go glow is enabled as true, bicubic upscale is false. And then we can say glow is enabled and bicubic upscale is false. So we'll set both of those to false. We'll get rid of that. And there we go. Now full screen is pretty simple as well. So if we come in here, we say, hey, if index is equal 0, then OS dot window full screen is equal to false. And finally, equal to 1, OS dot is equal to true. Simple enough. So that's basically the way to create a simple graphics setting screen. Now let's go ahead and test this. So we'll go up here, we'll hit play, we'll select our current scene, and let's take a look at this. So you can see how we have some nice reflections and some nice colors and nice stuff like that. If I go ahead and I click on my resolution, I can actually change it. So 1920 by 1080. Oh, we got an error here, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. Oh, that's why these are vector 2s, and I made them not vector 2s. So we'll say .x instead. That's my fault. So we'll change this to .x. And let's go ahead and refresh this and try this again. So you can see here we are. We'll change our resolution to 1920 by 1080, and you'll see that our resolution has changed. You'll see that our numbers and letters and things like that are all smaller. If we go ahead and we change it to 720, you can see how suddenly our graphics quality gets a little worse. If we go to 1440, you can see our graphics quality is slightly better. And if we change it to 2K or 4K, I think it is, you can see that it's even finer and nicer. Now, if I go ahead and click on this, if I can, and change it back to something, reasonable to see. There we go. Now, if I come up here, I can change my anti-aliasing to disabled. I can go to FXAA, and you see how it smooths out that stuff. I can change it to MSAA if I'd like. I can go all the way up to MSAA 8 times if I'd like. So there we go, or I can disable it. I can come in here and turn on or off SSAO. So SSAO high, you can see how down here, the SSAO high versus SSAO low, you can see how it's slightly less as nice, or I can shut it off completely, and now SSAO has been removed. Bloom quality, I can come in here, I can go high, I can go low, and you can see how it makes a slight difference. I don't know if you guys can actually see that difference, but there is a difference there. If I change it to high versus change, oh, that's SSAO. High versus low, you can see how I've got some more square to this. Whereas if I go to high, the square is kind of removed. Or if I go to off, it completely gets rid of the bloom. SS reflections, high resolution is what we have now. If I go to medium, you can see how it smooths it out. If I go to low, you'll see how it also smooths it out. And then, of course, off, I can shut it off completely. Now, full screen, I'm not really going to be able to show you, but if I go to full screen, you'll see it's now full screen. You guys can't really see much because I have a 2K monitor, so I'm sure it looks awful to you guys. But I can make it, 4K, and I can turn on, MSAA, and you can see how nice everything looks with like a high SSAO and a high resolution, everything. We'll go ahead and shut this off and let's scale this back up. And you can see kind of how our settings menu works. So simple enough. Now you'll see that something that you'll notice is once I went to full screen, it completely changed my resolution. And the reason why is because our default resolution is not the same resolution as my screen. My screen is a 2K ultra wide monitor. So, you know, it doesn't show the entire, when it does the math here, right? It actually sets this as the proper resolution to my screen. It doesn't actually do it to 1080p. So that's just something to keep in mind, right? So, you know, it's going to keep it on the proper resolution versus scaling it to the 1080p resolution, if that makes sense. Now, the easiest way to solve that is you can actually go into your project settings and set it somewhere in here. I believe it's under window, and you can change your stretching to, you know, I think I had it set to viewport and keep width. And you can actually come in here and adjust your default size here as well to match what your resolution is that you're trying to achieve. You also can do this through code, much like I did here. So something that I like to do when I create my, games is I actually just take this little min size and get tree, and I literally just grab this. I go up into my ready, I paste it, I come up here, and I set my min size to whatever resolution I want my system to be by default. So something like, 1080p right here. I just go ahead and I set it right here, and that will actually set our stuff up. So that way on load, it sets it to the correct resolution so that I'm not scrambling later to make it to the correct resolution. So when I refresh this, window size, oh, I didn't grab my window size. That's my fault. So we'll go ahead and grab that as well. And then we will refresh this. And that'll just default it to the correct resolution for me, which is kind of what I want. So what if we want to save these settings for the user, right? So after the user's already set their settings, we want to boot up the application with those settings, right? So the easiest way to do that is to go ahead and make a function called save settings. So what we're going to do is we'll scroll all the way down to the bottom. We'll go ahead and say func save settings. We'll go ahead and get all of our different settings here. So what we'll do is we'll say var resolution is equal to $, resolution dropdown dot selected. Now we can hit enter. Var AA is equal to $, anti-aliasing dropdown here dot selected. Var, I believe we had SSAO, so SSAO is equal to $SSAO quality dropdown dot selected, and then var bloom is equal to $bloom quality dropdown dot selected, and we'll just kind of run through the rest of these. So var SS is equal to $SS reflection dropdown dot selected. And then finally, var full screen is equal to $full screen selected and dot selected. There we are. Now that we have all of this information, these are all the indexes for our project here. So what we can do is we can actually come in here and say var file is equal to file.new. So what that's going to do is it's going to go ahead and create ourselves a file. Then we're going to say var error is equal to file.open. And then we got to go ahead and pick a location. So in my case, I'm just going to say user://settings.json. And we will go ahead and do comma file.write, so we can actually write to that file. And then we'll go ahead and say assert not error. That will allow us to assert that this was created properly and open properly. And then we're going to go ahead and say var saved data is equal to, and then let's go ahead and do a little bit of magic here. So what we're going to do is we're going to say parentheses, quote, and we'll say resolution, colon, resolution, comma, quote, AA is equal to AA, right? Comma, quote, SSAO, comma, or colon, SSAO. Let me put some space there. And then we'll do our next one, which is bloom, and I missed my comma, colon, bloom, comma, SS, and I need to put that in quotes, don't I? Colon, SS, comma, and then I believe next is full screen. Colon, full screen. Awesome. So now that we have that, what we can do is we can say file.store line, and we'll go ahead and pass in our saved data. But we can't just pass in our saved data because it's data right now. We need to actually convert it to JSON. So we can actually just say to JSON, and we'll pass in our saved data. Awesome. Cool. So now what we can do is if we save this and we go ahead and go over here, we right click on our node here, add in a child node. Let's add in a button, and we'll make this a little on the larger side here. We will put it over here and we'll say save settings. And we're going to go ahead and take that name so that I can have it. Gimme. And then we'll go ahead and paste that into our button. And we'll say save settings. Then we're going to go ahead and go to our node and we'll say on button down. Let's go ahead and click on save settings here. And then we can just say save settings. There we go. Simple enough. So basically what we're doing is we're getting all of the values of all of those drop downs. Then we are going to go create a file, write to that file, make sure that we didn't have any issues, and then just dump that data to that file. All right. So let's go ahead and test this real quick. So we'll hit play. We'll go ahead and set my screen to full screen. Actually, no, we won't because you guys can't see it. That's probably a good idea. So let me just make this a little bigger for you guys. We'll set the resolution set to 720p, let's say. We'll turn MSAA to 8x. We will set SSAO to low, bloom quality to low, and our SS reflections, and we will go ahead and click save. Now let's see what happens when we do that. If we go to project and we go to open project data folder right here, you will see that there is a JSON file here. If we go ahead and open that up, and it opens up in Visual Studio Code here, so you can see that we actually have all of our data right here. So now we've got to load that data, right? So let's go back over here and let's set up our load code. So we're going to come down here and we're going to go ahead and type func load underscore settings. And we will go ahead and put a colon there. And what we're going to do is we'll say var file is equal to file.new. Oh my goodness, I just can't type today. Come on, there we go. Var error is going to equal file.open our file. So we'll say user : //settings.json, comma, file.read, because we're reading that file. And then we'll say, hey, if there's an error, then print, and then we'll go ahead and return. So that way it doesn't load, it doesn't go through our load code and mess up all of our code. So now we can just say var data is equal to parse underscore JSON file dot get as text. And that's going to go ahead and pull our text here. And now what we can do is first we can set our settings, right? So we can say underscore on, and then you'll see we have all these different selection statements here. We can either A, pull out all these codes into helper functions so it makes more sense, or we can just use these. In my case, I'm just going to use these because I don't need to create additional functions. I'll just say on, and then we'll just pick it. So on anti-aliasing dropdown selected, right? And we'll say, hey, let's go set that setting. So we'll say on anti-aliasing dropdown selected, and we'll say D dot, and then whatever our anti-aliasing one was. In this case, it's AA. Now, if we were to run this, it would fail. And the reason why is because it's not an integer. So we need to cast this as an int because we're trying to set an index which is expecting an int. If you remember up here where we do our AA stuff, it's expecting an integer for our index. Index is equal to 0. So we got to make sure that we follow that. Now you'll see that I also made a mistake. It's actually data, not D data. There we go. And then we'll just hit enter and we'll say on underscore bloom. And we'll do the exact same thing. Int that data dot bloom. And then we'll go ahead and do the next one. Underscore on full screen. Int that full screen. And I forgot data. I don't know why I'm forgetting these things. There we go. And then we'll say underscore on, and we'll move to the next one, resolution, int data dot resolution. And then we'll say on underscore SSAO, int data dot SS. I forget if I did SSAO. There we go. Underscore on SS reflections, int data.ss, and I don't remember what I did for reflections. Did I not save reflections? I don't think I saved reflections. Resolution bloom. Let me see. SS reflections I have under SS. That's a bad name for it, but that's fine. SS. And we'll go ahead and take that. Now, this is going to work, right? So if I hit play, I forgot. So we're going to copy this. This is my bad. We're not calling this function. So let's go up to the top and let's go ahead and call this function. So let's go up here, paste it, save, and then go ahead and hit play. And you'll see that it loaded our settings. So you can see our resolution has been loaded. Everything's been loaded exactly as we expect it. So if we come in here and we change this resolution to 720 because I can't see anything, and we hit save and we close and we reload, you'll see that it's at 720 resolution. Now, something that you'll notice though is if we look at our resolution, you can see that this is not correct, right? This isn't the correct settings. All of these say like high, off. Our resolution is wrong, and I don't believe we have any anti-aliasing on, right? So if we actually open up our settings.json here, you can see that our stuff is all set to 0. Our resolution is set to 3. So some of this is correct, but some of this isn't correct, right? So let's go ahead and fix it. So how do we fix it, right? Well, what we can do is we can come down here and set our selections. So if we come into our save settings section and we just grab all of this, because to be honest with you, let's just grab it all. And let's go in here and paste it all right here. And then let's pull out all of these var sections here. Like so. And then let's set our selected equal to data.resolution in the first one. So selected is equal to data.resolution. And then we'll do our anti-aliasing drop down. So anti-aliasing. And then we're going to do our SSAO. So let's find that one right here. And then let's do our bloom quality. And then let's set our SS reflections, which again, I really don't like the name SS, but that's fine. And then we will go ahead and set our full screen as well. Cool. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and hit play. And then we can say, all right, let's set MSAA to 8. Let's set SSAO to high. So now I have SSAO. Let's set reflections to off. And let's set bloom quality to off as well. Hit save. Let's go ahead and close this. Play. And you will see that it has loaded all of our settings with all of the things that we just said there. And if we look at our JSON right here, it's all exactly what we expected. If I zoom this in a little bit for you guys, let me format this. So format document. You can see there's all of our settings. Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. So that's how simple it is to set up your settings inside of Godot. Now, if you guys need, you guys can put literally anything as long as you use the OS and the world environment and the viewport settings. You can pretty much do any setting inside of Godot. So 90% of these project settings have been exposed there. And that's how you generally do it. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, what about project settings? So in Godot, we do have the ability to set project settings. So you can just say project settings, and then you do these two braces, quote, and then you just kind of type the location, right? So you can actually come in here and look at your project settings. You can see there's a property location here, right? So if I were to copy this, and actually let me do something like width, and I were to, or I guess in this case, height, right? And I were to paste this, and I were to hit equals, I don't know, 800, right? I think right now ours is 600. So if I set this to 800, when I run this, nothing's going to happen. Okay? And the reason why nothing's going to happen is because project setting only takes effect when the project has been reset. So you have to close the project, and then you can go ahead and hit play. But you'll see that it doesn't work, right? And the reason why is because you have to apply those project settings. So you can say project settings dot save, and that'll save those project settings. So if I go ahead and hit play, and it runs, and then I close it, you'll see it says, hey, the following files are new. So if we reload them, and then we hit play, you'll see that now it's taken effect. So that's something to keep in mind. But that is a valid way to do it. I don't suggest it because it requires you to A, shut down their game and reload it, and it is a much more complicated way to handle it. Because if you're changing their project settings, you're literally changing these settings inside of here, and it is a lot, I guess, dirtier than changing it the other way. However, if there is something specific like handheld orientation, right, pulling that might be a little bit harder. As a matter of fact, I don't know if, let's see, OS, I don't know if that exists. OS dot handle. Okay, so it's not in here. Screen orientation. So it does exist. So really, I don't know if it's necessary to change any of these values, but you can. And that's kind of the beauty of Godot, is that you're allowed to make those changes. But anyway, that's all I have for you guys today. So we went over how to do various settings for your settings system. We also went through the process of saving your settings and loading your settings. And finally, we talked about different viewport settings that you can change and the advantages and disadvantages of doing that. So if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Hey, you know, if you dislike this video, go ahead and hit that dislike button because I'm here to make content for you guys. This video was a viewer suggestion. As with all of my videos, your suggestions mean a lot to me. So, you know, if you guys have any suggestions for future videos, let me know, or anything you want to learn. I'm more than happy to do it because I am here to make content for you guys. And that includes outside of Godot content. I had a guy ask me about a Blender video that I created a little bit ago. So I am more than happy to look at any application or anything as long as you guys want me to. Hey, and if you guys have any questions about this, go ahead and throw them in the comments below or hit me up on the Discord. Link is in the description. I'm more than happy to chat with you guys about any questions you guys might have about this or just in general about Godot. But that is all I have for you guys today. So thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you all next time. Thanks.